Good afternoon and welcome to the City Council meeting for Tuesday, June the 7th. Seen some moisture out there. I guess we're pretty happy. Everything's turning green. Hope everyone mowed their lawn prior. So with that, we'll start first of all with a roll call, Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Campbell?
Present.
Councillor Carlson? Councillor Dodick?
Present.
Councillor Middleton Hope?
Present.
Councillor Palladino?
Present.
Councillor Parker? Here. Acting Mayor Crowson?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel?
Here.
Mayor Higgin?
Present.
Councillor Carlson?
Present.
All members of council are in attendance. You have quorum.
Thank you. Move on to the acknowledgement statement. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we're gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Start with recognitions. To my far right, Councillor Middleton Hope.
Other than a recognition today that is the 150th anniversary of the Governor General's Foot Guards, of which my father was a member and a very proud member for many years.
Excellent. Deputy Mayor, or sorry, Acting Mayor Crowson.
Nothing from me, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Palladino.
Nothing, Your Worship.
Councillor Parker. All right. And to my far left here, Councillor Dodick.
Nothing.
Councillor Campbell.
Nothing today.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. A big shout out to Mother Nature for providing us some much needed moisture. It's about time. Second, a congratulations or a thank you to all those folks in our community who participated in No Mow May to try and get the bees and the pollinators a good chance at a good start this year. And an apology to my neighbors for the state of my lawn for the month of May, but it's been rectified.
Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I've got a few things. Congratulations to Cindy Bester and her team with the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce for hosting the Alberta Chambers of Commerce AGM last week. We had 137 attendees from throughout Alberta visit our community. Feedback from those attendees was great. They enjoyed everything that our city had to offer. They spent a lot of time walking around downtown, and they're still talking about how amazing it was, and the experience that they had in our downtown core was phenomenal. I also had the pleasure of bringing greetings from the city to the Asian Heritage Festival. It was a great celebration of our Asian heritage within our community. Some great dumplings. Councillor Middleton Hope was there, and we certainly enjoyed our fill of food. And I mean, the lion dance is just phenomenal every time. Love that. Congratulations to our Lethbridge College and University of Lethbridge graduates. Excited to see so many people cross the stage, and it was exciting to see too, with the University of Lethbridge, they had graduates from the previous year walk across the stage too in a condensed ceremony. So congratulations to all of those post-secondary graduates. And a special shout out to Lethbridge Police Service for having me out for a ride along on Saturday night. It was a great opportunity to hear and learn from our police services, some of the concerns and issues that they're facing, as well as just learning about some of the great work that they do. I certainly encourage every other member of council to contact our police chief and take that opportunity to go out with our police services on a ride-along. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I do have a couple. Graduation, obviously graduation throughout our community. Schools, university, college are all happening or have happened so far, so it's great. Just a huge congratulations to all those that have graduated within our community. Also, we do have a challenge, our council from Medicine Hat on a participation. So June is Participation Month, and we've got someone very excited over here, Councillor Middleton Hope. He's trying to get those points way up, does not want to lose against the council in Medicine Hat. So if there's any members of council that are still interested in this, I know a few of us have already signed up for it, but welcome to do that as we take on that council. The losing group will be dedicating and donating their time to a local charity. So, and we're just working that out. And I'm looking at the number here. We are number 10th in the province and 89 national. So that's pretty darn good so far. But I will, I got to bring up, Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel is in the lead right now in council, so good job. Kicking our butts. So thank you. We will move on to the adoption of the agenda. So agenda has been circulated. I have a resolution from Acting Mayor Croson that the agenda of the regular meeting of City Council on June 7th, 2022 be adopted as presented. So Acting City Clerk, are there any amendments to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there are two items which have been added under confidential items. Number 14.2, boards, committees, and commissions matters, and 14.3, the 2023-2026 operating budget update. So 14.2 BCC matters, and 14.3 operating budget update.
Thank you. Those additions, Acting Mayor Croson.
I'll call the question on the amended agenda.
Excuse me,
Agenda-
excuse me. It's on the consent agenda. I had
This is-
indicated I would like item 4.3 to be pulled.
Okay, that's on the next one, the adoption of the agenda.
Gotcha.
Okay, yeah. So, on the consent agenda. So with that, question has been called on the adoption of agenda. All in favor? Any opposed? Next, we move to the consent agenda.
Thanks. I request that item 4.3 on the consent agenda be moved. I understand that it will be moved to item number 8, and in fact, 8.1.4. So that'll be the response to January 18 OBM green bins.
All right, so 4.3 on the consent agenda, response to January 18th OBM green bins will be moved to committee submissions, 8.1.4. So with that, as amended, we will have a resolution here from Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel. Be it resolved that the minutes of the following meeting of City Council be approved and the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to sign the same. City Council meeting 2022-05-24, and further be resolved that City Council receive for information status of directed resolutions from 2022-06-07. Further be resolved that City Council approve the recommendations contained within the following Standing Policy Committee reports. 4.4, toxic e-waste eco drop-off. Be it resolved the City Council direct administration to implement a pilot program for up to 3 toxic e-waste roundups drop-off events for residents within city limits. And number 2, after the 1-year pilot program, administration to report back to council with the outcomes of the pilot and make the appropriate recommendations in terms of operational budget requirements if needed. Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So certainly we had on the consent agenda our meeting minutes, status of directed resolutions, and the one recommendation, and that's with regards to the toxic e-waste eco drop-off. In the past, the Waste and Recycling Unit offered opportunities for Lethbridge residents to safely dispose of hazardous waste and e-waste through toxic e-waste roundups, with roundups held several times a year in different parts of the city. These haven't been offered since the designation of a space for household hazardous waste and e-waste at the Waste and Recycling Center. This report outlined and discussed the expansion of that through a 1-year pilot project that would see 3 drop-off events in the city limits per year. If no other members of council have any further discussion or questions, I will call the question.
I see no questions in the queue, so take it as your opening and closing.
Yep.
All right, with that, question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? So carries. We have no presentations. We'll move on to official business, 6.1. Official business rescindment from Councillor Middleton Hope, rescindment of council decisions to proceed with paid parking at the NMAX Centre. Whereas the direction for paid parking originated from a recommendation contained in the 2019 KPMG Fiscal and Operational Review NMAX Centres, page 72 and 73, and whereas on June 29th, 2020, Council directed a corporate-wide expense reduction to which the NMAX Centre submitted a new revenue development for tax reduction initiative on paid parking, which is attached in the agenda, that Council adopted on December 14th, 2020. And whereas Council has received numerous complaints from the public, including businesses in close proximity to the NMAX Centre, highlighting a lack of community engagement and communication prior to decision-making being made to impose paid parking, and whereas the cost of to implement paid parking, ongoing enforcement and maintenance costs versus revenue generation potential may not have been fully explored, and whereas Council has been presented options that support the outcome of implementing paid parking versus other revenue-generating strategies more in line with community expectations. Therefore, be it resolved that Council, number 1, rescind all of its previous decisions to proceed with paid parking of the NMAX Centre with the exception of the sponsorship decision of April 26, 2022, and number 2, direct administration to report back to Council through the Economic Standing Policy Committee meeting on September 28, 2022, with additional viable options to generate revenue for the NMAX Centre, taking into consideration a more thorough cost-benefit analysis, and number 3, direct that any resulting tax pressure be referred to the November 2022 Economic Standing Policy Committee budget deliberations meeting. And we will open it up to questions. Councillor Dodick.
Yes, thank you. I have some questions for the administration. When I was looking at the operational review implementation plan, going back as far as March 2021, which was presented at the April 6, 2021 meeting, reference was made to NMAX generate parking revenue, and it indicated that this initiative was approved December 14, 2020 in the 10% reduction initiatives as an increase to revenue to reduce tax support. Planning development will begin in early 2021 and implementation will follow once the NMAX Centre is operating at full capacity and back to full event calendar. Then as I go through the various implementation plans, including May 4 and June 15 of 2021, it specifically talks about a number which is the same number that was approved by this previous council in terms of what they were trying to achieve in terms of parking revenue. So in both May 4th and June 15, 2021, it said one-time cost to implement annual average revenue increase of $341,700, again contingent upon return to normal conditions past COVID. And those same plans moved forward in July 27 of 2021, again contingent upon return to normal conditions. Prior to the last election, August 24, 21, the same operational review implementation plan indicated the one-time costs again, $341,700. Planning is complete. Implementation to start Q4 2021 if operations return to normal. New council gets elected. The implementation or the operational review implementation November 2021 plan that was before council on December 14, 2021, using the same numbers. It said generated parking revenue, one-time cost to implement annual average revenue increase of $141,700. Said delayed until September 6 of 22. Planning, development, software, equipment, and signage are complete. Implementation to begin Q2 2022. Go live September 6, 22. So my question is really quite simple. Council has been advised, and this has been public information for a long time, that this was in the plans and that the implementation had been postponed because of COVID. Is that not correct?
Question for Mr. City Manager as designate. Is that?
My apologies. We're just figuring out which one of us is best to answer that. I see Mr. Gallucci here. He's probably the best position to answer that question.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, at that point in time, it was decided that it would be best to delay the paid parking implementation due to COVID and everything else that was going on at the time.
Yeah. And that was information that was available to the public?
Yeah, that would have been, yes.
Okay, and so my next question is to the city treasurer, and this is a question you've answered before, is that if the implementation is not proceeded with in September of 2022, as has been confirmed by prior council, and even this council twice now, absent that revenue, there will be a concomitant pressure on the general residential property and commercial property taxpayer. Is that not correct?
Through your worship, to Councillor Dodick, in regards to the funding side, that is correct that there would be a pressure from the operating budget component of $113,900. What council, if I would just remind them, from the delay from last September onwards, it was one-time funding that was used from the MRSR of $341,700. to get us to September 1st. An additional 113,900 pressure would be there on budget because the revenues wouldn't be there going forward. So once again, that's depending on the timeframes that council decided to implement.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Dodick. Next, we have in line Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. Just, if I can, just to get some clarity on that then. The immediate pressure is in this year, which is, I think, City Treasurer said 115,000. I didn't write it down.
Great. Your Worship, to Councillor Carlson. So within the base operating budget, as Councillor Dodick mentioned, there is the net revenue inside of there for $341,700 each year. So by not having that in 2022, how council has shorted up to September is through the MRSR for this year. There would still be, it was contemplated at this stage that it would be the last 4 months of the year that would have revenues, and therefore the difference in that would be $113,900.
That's immediate that council would have to find. And then going forward into the next 4-year cycle, we have to find nearly 400.
341,700 ongoing is in the base budget that we would have to deal with. And that would be, I think, going back to Councillor Dodick, roughly about a 0.2% tax increase.
For every property in town.
Correct. Yeah. Over a 4-year period, you can increase it over a 4-year period by 0.05% if you smooth it out across the...
Thank you for that. My next question would be around the wording in the resolution. If I can just scroll up a tiny bit. I don't have it open in front of me. I'll just ask the question if it's best I can. I think it says looking for additional viable options for revenue generation is what it would task administration to do. So through you, your worship, to the city manager or designate, is that not what council tasked to and a bit years ago with the 5 to 10% reductions to find every way possible to reduce the tax burden on the average residence or property to try and find ways to get to zero? And so would this not be just doing the same exercise over again and coming back with the same options? Or were there things that were never looked at?
I couldn't fully speak to all of the different options at that time. I'm not sure if Mr. Gallucci would like to speak further on it. I do know that there has been some other things that came forward on potential sponsorships and so forth recently.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, through Councillor. It is, at the time, we had reviewed everything we could for the 10% reductions. The paid parking was part of the program that we were looking at anyway from the KPMG review that came about. Since that time, we've continued to look at a number of different options and most recently came into some new ideas that we probably could do it with the help of the city manager in expanding our ability to reach some other areas that we normally couldn't before. So while we are in the middle of looking at that right now and we're reviewing, we're going to try our hardest to of course try recover that kind of cost. But at this point in time, we couldn't guarantee that, but we are looking at other options that became available to us.
Thank you. Then if I can, Mayor Higgin, just a supplemental while you're up there, Mr. Gallucci. You think there are other options available to generate more revenue or reduce tax support of the NMAX?
We do, and we're exploring.
So if you explore those and come up with those, it could go further to reduce the general property taxes rather than just replace what may be lost through parking revenue.
Potentially, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Next, we have Acting Mayor Crowson.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. My question is for the city manager or designate, likely the deputy city clerk. Have the Hurricanes or any other groups who rent the facility reached out to speak at one of our standing policy committees about this issue?
There have been no requests.
So not an issue that they have chosen to come to council and actually discuss.
We've never had that request.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Higgin.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Are there any further questions? Seeing no further questions, I do have one question to, through the city manager or his designate. I could imagine it's probably going to be Mr. Matthews. Can you tell me what the balance of our MRSR fund is currently right now?
If you give me 1 second, I'll just take a look at it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anybody else have any further questions? Awesome. Deputy Mayor, Mayor Ramphal.
I guess through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Gallucci, can I have another question for you, please? Given that we've heard that this was approved back in 2020, were any communication plans undertaken with regards to the paid parking with either any of the stakeholders within the NMAC Center or with any of the residents? Had any of that started? Was any of that done?
After, the resolution of 2020, we did begin conversations initially with the college, with the Soccer Association, and with the Hurricanes, just to let them know about what was happening, what was going to be taking place. We did not get to the community piece. Prior to us moving forward, the parking was delayed. And then with the new council, we wanted to bring it back to the new council to make sure we wanted to proceed with it. So the community communication piece has never really gone forward yet because we were always waiting to have a green light to fully implement.
And what were some of the results of the conversations you had with the Soccer Association, College, and Hurricanes?
With the college, they seemed to be, not surprised. They just wanted to know exactly what we would be charging and how would we be charging in relation to them because they charge for parking. With the Soccer Association, they needed to know, they were glad to know because they have issues too because parents go park at night and have kids in their programmings at night. So they were trying to consider their options, what's available to them then. Should they charge for paid parking? Should they look at different ways of operating? And then with the Hurricanes, they did not like paid parking at all. They thought it was a terrible idea and it would impact ticket sales. It would also probably impact other potential sales, if not ticket sales, because it's understood that most people spend a certain amount, and if they have to pay for parking, they'll just cut one thing else out. Maybe it's a piece of merchandise or food and beverage or something else.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. City Treasurer.
To you, Mayor, the balance as of December 31st was $34,192,565.
Okay, and is it fair to say that the usual source for one-time funding would come from the MRSR?
That is correct.
And if I recall correctly, last council term, there was a large part of this funding allotment was put aside for council initiatives going into the future. Is that correct?
Yes, so if you talk about one-time funding and so forth,
Yes.
pieces, yes.
So $34,192,052, and the amount that we're looking for is is 100 and something thousand for this year?
13,900.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. If I can just get some clarity on that, Mr. Matthews. The balance is what? And the commitments are what?
Okay.
Because just because you have it in the bank, if you've got mortgage payments coming out, et cetera, doesn't mean you've got it to spend.
To your worship, to Councillor Carlson. So the balance again is at December 31st, although my understanding is it's still fairly close here, just checking in background, $34,192,565. And the commitments against it, bear with me for a second, $11,739,241 as of December 31st.
Thank you for that. Final question on this subject. We've been backstopping the revenue losses at the NMAX from the MRSR thus far. Is that sustainable? Is that a good practice to do ongoing funding from one-time funding sources?
To your worship, to Councillor Carlson, so that is true that well, we have been backstopping some of that. Some of that money came from BAU, the COVID components that were set aside. However, as well, to your question in regards to using one-time funding sources for ongoing, that is not something that I would recommend, nor would it's within the summary of fiscal principle practices document as council's past direction that one-time funding sources are used for one-time things, not for ongoing.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Higgin.
Councillor Campbell?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wonder if a member of the Lethbridge Hurricanes who would like to speak to the question, just to explain. Sorry. Oh, no. I just want to hear from you the real major concerns. I know we've heard it in media and other outlets, but I'd just like to hear it here today about the major concern about the $5 parking fee that is going to be impacting your organization. If someone could speak to
Councillor Campbell, if I could just ask, you'd have to have that passed through council to ask questions from the audience, which is fine.
My apologies.
You're right to do, but if you'd like to ask that question, we'd have to first of all check. And what is it? Just need a majority on that. So ask, is there anybody that's not in favor of having the question asked? Oh, so someone would need to make that motion, Councillor.
Could I make that motion? Just a quick question, just to get a perspective from the Hurricanes organization.
All right. All in favor? Any opposed? So carries.
Thank you. Thank you. Just again, I just want to hear it clearly from the organization about the impact of the $5 parking fee and how it's going to impact your organization going forward. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. So I'm Doug Paisley. I'm the president of the board of directors of the Hurricanes, and I've brought Terry Hausman with us as well. He's the general manager of the business operations. Terry's probably best suited to answer this question because he's done all the legwork and the research with the league, you know, and getting the feedback from our commissioner and the different cities that have gone through this that are also in the WHL and the challenges they faced when going through the parking and rescinding the parking. So I'll let Terry take the mic.
Thank you, Your Worship, Councillor Campbell. You know, what we do know is just basically what we've been able to ask throughout the entire league, our league partners that have gone down this road before. And this manual's been written before, and so, you know, we look at it as why are we going to write it again? Because we've talked to many different clubs that have implemented it and then have taken it away because it has directly affected their opportunity to increase their revenues. And not only that, it definitely takes away from also the building being able to generate extra revenue. So for us, I think when you look at us and we operate basically anywhere from 6 to 7 games a month, when you have 3 games in the middle of in 1 week at any given time, I mean, that just takes money out of their pockets in order to bring their families and create a family entertainment within the city. So it eliminates that entertainment opportunity for the families.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks. Oh, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'd just like to add, so one of the best resources within the province of Alberta we received was from Merrick Sutter from Red Deer. And Merrick said when they went through the process, what they found was obviously there was quite a bit of animosity and pushback initially. So they've got their own, things to deal with of getting the fans in the building, and they found that there was a huge reduction in walk-up, which is your biggest ticket price. The other thing they found was the reduced spending on the $5 ticket meant they didn't buy food and beverage, or they didn't buy the United Way jersey off the back, or they didn't support the Lethbridge Minor Hockey Association group that was there, you know, working, piggybacking us for fundraising, or the Girl Guides that were there, the Canadian Cancer Society that was there. So they found that $5 spend on the way in created a $5 reduction on the spend inside the building. So whether that's a revenue generation for the NMAX Center, that they're going to see a loss in revenues and money spent on food and beverage, we also saw it, you know, or they also saw it on whether it was merchandise, whether it was supporting the events that were going on inside the building, piggybacking the game. Was probably the most impactful statement that was made by one of our league partners and one of our provincial colleagues.
Thank you for your answers. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Next, Councillor Dodick.
I have a questions for the Hurricanes organization, actually two of them. You heard a question from Acting Mayor Belinda Crowson asking from administration whether or not there had been a request from the Hurricane organization to appear before a special purpose committee, for example, the Economic Finance Committee, to address the concerns with respect to parking. And you've heard that the parking has been on the table for at least a couple of years. Now, my question is, since the special purpose committee function is to allow anyone who has anything to say on the issue to appear before council, and that would include the Hurricanes, the taxpayer, anyone involved that may be either for or against it. Is there a reason why the Hurricanes did not use that format, which would then have allowed a lot of people to bring presentations and to be questioned on them, rather than actually showing up in council today and having a councillor seek permission from council to be able to ask questions of you? So the question is, why not come before the special purpose committee meeting to have this discussion rather than dealing with it in the manner we are today?
Yeah, fair question. Thank you for your question, Councillor Dodick. I guess, for lack of a better term, we were staying in our own lane. We were working operationally with the people we work with at the NMAX Center. There was dialogue back and forth. There was conversation. We were aware that it was coming. We obviously did our homework on the backside. We were very caught by surprise when it was voted on and implemented. And you know, really hadn't had our chance to speak, weren't familiar with the, sorry, what was the acronym? The SP?
Special Purpose Committee.
Yeah, we weren't even aware of the Special Purpose Committee, no. In meetings with Mike Fox, he did identify that committee to me. We had put a letter in actually to Mayor and Council, so I'm sure you all saw the letter dated May 5th, you know, requesting to rescind and requesting that meeting, and weren't sure of the process to get it to the special committee, and had hoped that by reaching out to all of you, there would have been follow-up or feedback or a response to say, here's your path, this is your direction.
Okay, well, that leads to the second question, and actually, which puzzles me to a certain degree, the response you just gave me with respect to the Special Purpose Committee. On January 1922, there was an Economic Standing Policy Committee report submitted by the General Manager of the NMAX Center, Mr. Kim Gallucci. And that report requested that Council approve the amendment of the Lethbridge Hurricane Hockey Club's 2021 annual contribution of $166,677 set on the lease agreement to postpone that payment for another year, and that in fact that was the second request for a postponement, the first one having been previously granted, and that at a subsequent council meeting on February 1, 2022, the council unanimously, by a vote of 9-0, approved to give the Hurricanes the accommodation that they requested. So I'm somewhat concerned in the sense that the request had to be made of Mr. Gallucci. He went before the Economic Standing Policy Committee based on your request, and Council, by 9-0, voted to give you that accommodation. Do you agree, in fact, that that did happen?
Yeah, I'll get Terry to come up to speak to that, because that would be operational and that's outside the board's.
Thank you, Councillor Dodick. So yeah, going back 2 years ago while we were in COVID and we had no opportunity to have any attendance within the building, we did approach Mr. Galucci in regards to helping us defer our $167,000 payment to shorten that up. And thank you to the council for obviously passing that and moving forward. And then going into this past season, obviously when we started the year, we didn't know what we were expecting. We were at 50% capacity, started off, we didn't know if we were gonna hit another wave and had absolutely no fans within the building. So I think a prudent business practice would have been to exercise all opportunities and options that we put forth, and we were able to talk to Mr. Galucci to help us put that through again.
But you agree that was a pretty good accommodation?
A very good accommodation. We thank you for that.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Any further? So next we'll go to Councillor Parker.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the questions, members of council. My question is obviously to me to Councillor Milton Hope, the mover of the resolution. Obviously, since we were elected in October, would you agree this has probably been the biggest decision in regards to pushback in the community? When I say that, not only from the hurricanes, the surrounding neighbors, the surrounding businesses, that this has probably been the biggest thing we've had pushback on. Would you agree on that?
I think it's a close tie with transit, maybe.
And so it's probably, so your resolution in reconsider rescinding is to kind of go back to the drawing board and kind of reverse what has occurred based on what you've heard leading up to the vote, but more importantly, since the vote.
It is, and I have a statement to read at some point when His Worship provides that.
Perfect. And if this were to pass, I don't know if you can answer this question, what happens? Does it just go back to Mr. Galucci goes back, continues to work to find more revenue streams, but if this passes, does that mean that this or do we have to re-vote on the whole resolution again? Just so the community knows.
Rescinds from what the resolution states in there, that it, where's it at here, that it rescinds the previous decisions, all previous decisions, with the exception of the sponsorship decision on April 26, 2022.
And then we need 2/3 on that. Am I correct, Deputy City Clerk?
Yeah, we need 2/3 in the affirmative.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Hagan. I think my questions have mostly been asked, but just to follow up on Councillor Parker, if I can, about this being the most contentious issue. Just if somebody can keep me in the loop of, I haven't had that many emails. Maybe I don't run in the same circles, or
Clarification to that,
Thank you,
please.
because
I'm just going by when the decision was made, and this is my personal observation, just so I give you some point of view. It seems like there was a lot of social media regards concern about this. There was lots of letters written to members of City Council. There, a lot of businesses were contacted, or individuals in such areas like Tudor Estates. Letters were written and all that. So I'm kind of taking, encapsulating all the things that I've heard since the vote. And so I think when I'm taking this is kind of a reactionary to which I at least heard, and that's why I asked the question to the mover. So that's at least that was my
trying to think of transit, CAT bylaws, etc. Other things that, we've all called the most troublesome issue.
But at the same time, the transit was something actually previous to the election as well. I'm thinking I'm speaking as post-election. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Right, questions? Do we have any further questions? If you have no further questions, we'll have Councillor Middleton Hope open up debate. Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to this motion today. I do not take lightly in my actions to request Council reconsider a recent decision that approved an initiative by the NMAX Centre to proceed with a new revenue development for tax reduction initiative. I am proud of the work we have accomplished on Council, and I am confident there will be many successes to follow. However, I believe and strongly urge my fellow councillors to reconsider this decision and direct administration to research and prepare a thorough cost-benefit analysis for generating revenues from the NMAX Centre that contemplate additional opportunities beyond securing sponsorship and imposing a parking levy. Since direction was provided to administration in April to proceed with a pay-for-parking formula at the NMAX Centre, many complaints from the public and area businesses have been received. The complaints in general speak to the negative impact paid parking will have on event attendance, on the surrounding community, on businesses, and on our primary tenant. And I think you will agree that it is our duty to listen to the citizens of this city and at times adjust our approach. I believe this is one of those times. Let me be clear. I am all for having the NMAX Centre pay its way. I support initiatives that will underwrite the impact on the tax support that is provided to the NMAX Centre. However, I am gravely concerned that the revenues that may be anticipated are overly optimistic, and the costs such as kiosks, parking control on-site and off-site, and the impact to residents and businesses in the vicinity of the NMAX Centre have not been fully captured. This appears to be a reactive measure in an effort to reduce the impact of tax-supported endeavors. But I must stress that I believe there are conditions, in particular expenses, that have not been clearly articulated, which in turn has adversely affected Council's decisions. I ask that you support this motion to request that administration conduct a thorough analysis, including public discourse, and return with a greater menu of options for this body to consider, and that there are well thought out, well researched, and well articulated. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to hearing from my colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Middleton Hope. We'll move over to continue debate. Councillor Dodick.
Yes, I will not be supporting this resolution. I think the information was provided to prior council was provided to current council. We heard from Mr. Gallucci indicating that they will be doing ongoing research to see if there's any way to mitigate the costs of the parking on a go-forward basis. But the reality is that there is going to be a pressure of about $115,000 this year and over $300,000 on an ongoing basis if we decide all of a sudden to rescind this. At the last time we discussed this, it became as simple as who should pay for the costs of the funding I just referred to, or the shortfall I referred to? Should it be the users of the NMAX, or should it be the taxpayer? And my decision was to go in favor of the taxpayer and support the imposition of the parking fee. Parking is not unusual. We have it downtown. Various other places has parking everywhere, whether it be at the hospital, anywhere, sports arenas in the major centers as well. Now, I appreciate the Hurricanes' position, but I want to point out, and as the Hurricanes candidly acknowledge, that we have, and we do acknowledge that they are an important tenant and user of the NMAX, and we have accommodated them as much as we can. But at some point, we also have to look at both sides of the picture. In this case, the side I'm looking at is the residential and commercial taxpayer. I know it's not a ton of money, but it is something that we have to consider, particularly bearing in mind that we will soon be entering into a 4-year budget cycle approval process. So unfortunately, as much as I appreciate and respect all the Hurricanes have done, I can't support this resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Dodick. Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Mayor Hagan. I won't repeat much of what Councillor Dodick said, but for many of the same reasons I won't be supporting this resolution. This has been on the books for some time. It was a tax reduction initiative, which was a big focus of previous council over the last couple of years, to give the local taxpayers as much of a break as a reduction as we could. This was one of many tax reduction initiatives that we undertook. Similar to Councillor Dodick, I've got to vote in favor of the taxpayer. The folks that use the NMAX, I think, will understand the parking charge for the comfort of driving in there, or it's an easily avoided fee. Ride your bike, catch a ride with a friend, walk, take the bus. So folks can avoid paying the fee if they want. One of the other options that was looked at, which if this resolution passes will probably come back from Mr. Galucci, is adding $1 or $2 to every ticket price, which doesn't seem fair to me. Whether you drive to park there or not, you're still being forced to pay, whether you use the parking lot or do not. Simple math says that if you grab your friend's minivan and say, I'll pick up 9 of you, it's 55 cents each. So I think there are various ways to avoid paying this if people so choose. And so this has been on the books for many years. I think there's been lots of notice to the public, to the various groups, that this was coming down the pipe. And so I won't be supporting it this time because this was a tax reduction initiative. And I firmly stand behind the taxpayers on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Councillor Parker.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Milton-Hope, for bringing this forward. I know you and I have been discussing this over the last month, or if not longer, since this was first voted on. First of all, we can't compare ourselves to Calgary, and everyone always says, well, the Flames, they charge, and people pay it because it's a big ticket, it's a big event. No offense, Hurricanes are a great organization, but you really don't have the same draw. So Calgary can justify doing that. Edmonton can justify paid parking. I'm looking this from the view of practicality. In theory, it sounds really good, but let's be practical here. A lot of the Hurricane fans are seniors, seniors being even people 55, 60, 70. I can't imagine when they get there, they pull in there, they probably want to get into the game, they're going to be filling out the kiosk, and at first there's probably going to be some confusion no matter how old you are, and they're going to be mad because they got to pay. So now you have a bitter person coming in, and if they're not doing it right, they're probably going to miss the first half of the first period. They're going to come in, they're going to be bitter, and most likely, like most people, they're going to ask, well, who made this stupid decision? And guess who will be working the door? Probably a volunteer who's going to be venting, explaining what you're doing. But you know what a lot of people are going to do, and some people they like to save a buck or two. They're going to park in the surrounding neighborhood. Huge amount of pressure right out there just so they can save $5. People do it. They do it, and there's nothing wrong with that. And some of them may move into an adjacent church, an adjacent business, and now it's up to that business or church to enforce it. Now you're putting the burden onto them, which technically they shouldn't even have to be doing. I don't think a business should have to put up a bunch of cement barricades around their parking lot to prevent people from parking. I believe that the taxpayer shouldn't be paying for this. So the parking does have to be paid. So why don't we just add a small charge to the ticket? A $1, a $2, called a local improvement charge. And you know what? At the end of the day, people accept that and they understand that. That's part of the process of keeping the building, upkeep, the grounds and all that. I believe Mr. Galucci is doing a good job trying to find other revenue streams. I brought up ideas of maybe a local company sponsoring 5 or 6 parking spots and saying these spots are sponsored by ABC Realty, whatever you want. Or possibly putting up a sign generating revenue. I know there's some restrictions in regards to zonings and all that, but I think we have to give Mr. Galucci some time to bring some proposals forward. But I think at the end of the day, just add a local improvement levy, some kind of ticket, $2, $1, $3, amortize it over so much time. I think that's the way to do it. But I think the way we're going to do it is going to cause more harm than good, and I think it's going to leave a really bad taste in people's mouth. Lastly, I'm glad we have this resolution because this is accountability. And we've heard it loud and clear when we make the wrong decisions on council. Sometimes we have to admit that we made the bad decision. Some will argue that we made the right decision, but I think collectively we didn't make the right decision, and I don't think it was the right idea. And I think quite often people don't speak up until they find out it directly impacts them. So just because someone didn't come to an SBC, it's usually after the fact. We learned that with carts. We learned that with transit. As soon as you make a decision, then you understand the consequences. So this gives us an opportunity to go back to the drawing board and find another solution. So I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm always happy to do more public consultation. I'm a huge supporter on that. But this was approved back in 2020. As we heard, communication had started to move the process forward, and then there was a stop and a thought of, oh, let's bring this back to council and see what new council thinks. It was moving forward. There was an opportunity for groups to come forward to a number of SPCs this year to speak to this, and nobody came forward. For me, there's a fine line between community consultation and being bullied in the media and on social media. To me, that's unacceptable. I would hope that Mr. Gallucci and his team will continue to seek other options for revenue generation at the NMAX. And for many of the same reasons that both Councillors Dodick and Carlson have outlined, I will not be supporting this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel. Next, we have Acting Mayor Croson.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. I too will not be supporting this resolution. I feel for the Hurricanes, I feel for their fans, and in a perfect world, you know, I might think differently, but we don't live in a perfect world. We're facing a housing crisis. We're facing rising inflation and people not being able to pay for food. We have one of the highest poverty levels in the province. We have a lot of big issues to cover, and putting more money or more taxes onto the average person is not something I can support at this time. If the money could somehow be found between now and September, I might think differently. But what my colleagues are asking us to do is to rescind this and then go look for the money. I would look at it the other way. If the money can be found, then maybe a new decision can be made. But at this point, I cannot support this. I will offer to the Hurricanes and suggest to the Hurricanes that they come and speak to the Economic Standing Policy Committee. Come talk to council, have a public conversation. Maybe we can come up with new ideas, but at this point, I cannot support this resolution.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Next, we'll go to Councillor Palladino.
Mayor, I will support this motion by Councillor Middleton Hope. Let's put the pause button down on this one for a few months, and we've done it before. We did it with the green bins being moved from the back to the front. We've taken a break and taking a bigger look at it. Let's get this cost-benefit analysis a little accurate, and let's get this larger menu of options that we talked about. So I'm going to support this resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Palladino. Next, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not going to add much to what my colleagues have said today, other than, you know, first of all, major respect for the Lethbridge Hurricanes and what they do for the city. I wholeheartedly love the organization, but you know, we all hate change. We all hate to pay that extra couple of bucks, and here I am, a senior, having to go pay for my parking. And I remembered my license plate number, which I'm happy. I was just up in Calgary and I had to put it in. I remembered it, so there's that. But yeah, it is a pain. It's you know, we can go back and Councillor Croson can talk about how everyone hated parking meters downtown and the uproar, and you know, how that continued on for a number of years. But I mean, it's the reality of what we live in. And again, dealing with taxpayers' dollars and dealing with the pressures that we're about to receive. And I know that Mr. Gallucci and his team are always looking for other ways to support the Hurricanes, and I think they will continue to do that. But at this point, right now, I cannot support the resolution as it stands. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Campbell. I will be supporting this resolution. A lot of my colleagues before had spoken a little bit to the engagement that we need throughout our community. I look at, it's not a no to parking right now. It may be just a not right now. It may be a no, we need to move ahead. But that engagement, getting out, talking to the community, finding out what they haven't been engaged with. We haven't. We know. We get the calls. So, you know, I look back to previous council, and I spoke a little bit before this in my question about, you know, what's sitting in our reserves of, and we had just 34,192,000, 12 million allocated. That's what's, left over, we've got $22 million. Not that it's for, let's just go out and spend this. This is left for a reason. And I know the previous council, when we were going through our budget deliberations, we didn't want to hand tie the future councils. We left some dollars, to me, for exactly things like this. Funding to be able to help and support, different organizations. We've come through COVID. We know this is a tough one, and if we've heard that this has come forward before council before, it has. We've had COVID. We're coming through this. This isn't, again, a no for parking. To me, stand back, have a look. What are some of the other options? So I will definitely support this resolution from Councillor Middleton Hope. And with that, I'll turn it back for closing. Any further remarks, Councillor Middleton Hope?
No, I think we've heard from everyone. We've heard their positions. I think what we've not taken into consideration, and I would like, just before the vote, I would like them to consider what the costs of doing business are. We don't know what the cost of the kiosks are going to be. We don't know what the costs are going to be in terms of the impact on the local community. That means the businesses and the neighborhood. We don't know what those costs are yet. All I'm asking for is for this to go back so that we can have a clear understanding of what it's going to cost us to implement $5 parking. I agree with the sponsorship. I agree with other methodologies in terms of generating revenue. They should be held accountable to generate revenues. But at the end of the day, I don't think this council or previous councils have a clear understanding for what those costs are going to be going forward. And with that, I close.
That's the call for the vote. And actually, we'll take this by roll call.
The vote on the NMAX parking requires 2/3 votes in the affirmative. Councillor Carlson?
Opposed.
Councillor Dodick?
Opposed.
Councillor Middleton Hope?
In favor.
Councillor Palladino?
In favor.
Councillor Parker?
In favor.
Acting Mayor Croson?
Opposed.
Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel?
Opposed.
Mayor Higgin?
In favor.
Councillor Campbell?
Opposed.
There being 5 votes against, the motion is lost.
Thank you. We will move on to 6 point. We're going to take a bio break. Is it okay? Did you want that now, or did you want to go through 6.2? Could we do it after 6.2? Okay, we'll do. So we'll move quickly on to official business 6.2 from Councillor Dodick right after this one here. Is that all right? Okay. Change to commencement, a resolution from Councillor Dodick, official business, change to commencement time for public hearings. Whereas City Council has historically held public hearings at 4 p.m. and whereas recently City Council has identified that there is often a long recess between council items and public hearings, adding potential inefficiency into the meeting process. And whereas scheduled public hearings to earlier in the day may increase administrative efficiencies related to public hearings, and whereas public hearings must follow a legislatively prescribed advertising process, and whereas council recognizes creating efficiencies in meeting processes will assist in providing good governance to the municipality, therefore be it resolved that City Council direct administration to change the time for the commencement of public hearings from 4 p.m. to 3 p.m. beginning in September 2022 by preparing an amendment to the Council and Standing Policy Committee meetings calendar to remove the time for public hearings and prepare a communication campaign for the community to provide notice of these changes. Councillor Dodick.
Are there any questions?
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. Through you to the mover I can. Councillor Dodick, it just occurred to me while Mayor Higgin was reading the official business motion. Any thought to even earlier, like noon, so that even before the council meeting starts, we have a public hearing, and then it can appear on the agenda later. I'm just trying to think of timelines for people to show up.
You're asking if I had any thoughts? No.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Any further questions?
I mean, the reason for the resolution was self-explanatory, is that over the last 7 to 8 months, and actually even when I was on council beforehand, we always stop the council meetings for the public hearing, so it is a fixed time. But lately, it seems like there's been an hour and up to 2 hours split, and even though it talks about potential inefficiencies, there actually are inefficiencies. And if you're working around people's work schedules, most people work beyond 4 anyways. 3 o'clock makes the most sense for me, although I'm not married to 3 o'clock, but that's what's in the resolution, and I would ask for council support.
So I have a question from Acting Mayor Croson.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin.
Does it involve SPCs?
Mean standing policy committees? Actually, my question is specifically on the timing, and it follows up on what Councillor Carlson was asking. I can see how this would be much more efficient for council, but have we done any reaching out to the public to see if 3 p.m. works better for the public and for those who normally come to public hearings? Do we have any sense, either from Councillor Dodick or from administration, if this would work for the public?
I have no idea whether it would or not. I mean, we've never had complaints from anyone that it was at 4 o'clock, so maybe I'm thinking that if it was at 3 o'clock, it would be about the same situation. I don't know if administration has any comment in that regard.
Through your worship, yes, Councillor, we haven't done any reaching out to the public to see if there's any impact. That said, since the agenda was released, we haven't heard any concerns either. So,
thank you. Thank you, Mayor Higgin.
Thank you. Next, we have no one further in the queue, so to open debate. Councillor
I am debating this in favor.
All right. Any further? Councillor Carlson?
A quick question to the Deputy City Clerk, if I can. How much of a onerous task is this to change? Is it onerous at all?
No.
Excellent. So then changing back, say we do make an attempt, because I agree that 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock probably isn't going to make much of a difference to folks, but if we hear great concerns, we can always reconsider, correct?
All it requires is a resolution. It's not, the time is not specific in the procedure bylaw.
Thank you. And I will be supporting this, especially something that kind of caught my attention as I was going through here. If it's at 4 o'clock, staff is usually 8 to 4. For efficiencies, you're right, Councillor Dodick. I do appreciate bringing that forward. I was looking at more as far as in the meeting we can stop, we can continue later and pause. So I will be supporting the resolution. Councillor Midland Hope.
Just an observation, as I did in the previous motion. I don't think we have enough information, quite candidly. I haven't heard from administration that we've reached out to the public, that the public is supportive of this, that they are clamoring at the moat to try and get in and listen to the information an hour earlier, and at 4 o'clock doesn't work. What do other cities do? Are other cities at 3 o'clock? Are they at 2 o'clock? Do we have any information on that?
I understand that some of the cities start like at what Councillor Carlson was talking about, like at noon or at 1. So I don't think there's any magic to a specific time. I don't know, Mr. Sarsfield?
We haven't done a survey of other cities. We could if directed.
You know, if that is a concern of yours, Councillor Milton Hope, I don't have any problem of deferring this resolution for 2 weeks, and if that is something that you would like to see.
I'm just simply asking the question, if you know, what do other communities do, and what have we done in terms of reaching out to the people that we hope would attend our meetings? We haven't done either of those. So at the end of the day, I'm wondering if there is an opportunity to perhaps pursue that more closely.
All right, we are in questions and debate and questions here. Councillor Carlson, I'll entertain. Do you have a question, debate?
Just wondering if it was going to be a question if we were going to table it, but I'm not in favor of tabling.
Is there would you like to make a motion to table? Okay, so with that, I see no further questions. I'll entertain questions or debate at this moment because we've kind of popped back and forth a bit, but I don't see either. So with that, in closing, Councillor Dodick?
Ask for council support.
Question has been called. All in favor?
I don't have an answer
Any? I do not have an answer for that. Well then, that was. 10-0? So, with the resolution, I see that passed. Any opposed? And there's none opposed. With that, oh, sorry, Councillor Croson, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. It's delayed a little bit, my apologies. So that passes 8-1, thank you very much. And with that, we'll take a quick bio break. We'll return at 3 o'clock. Thank you, 15 minutes. All right. Thank you for your patience here. Sorry, we're a couple minutes behind. I will continue on with committee submissions. This particular submission requires a 2/3 vote, just in advance to know, but I will read it. It's moved by Councillor Campbell, the Chair of the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee, Community Wellbeing and Safety Committee, CWSC, Governance Model, 8.1.1. Be resolved that City Council endorse the proposed CWSC Terms of Reference and Governance Model as an Attachment 1, and further be resolved that Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee recommend that City Council rescind the 4th operative clause of their May 13th, 2019 decision as below. Further be it resolved that City Council act as the interim decision-making body for all family community support services, FCSS, outreach support services, OSSI, and reaching home funding allocations. So we'll open up for questions. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Hagan. Just a quick question through you to the Deputy Clerk, if I can. At one point, I saw that this requires a 2/3 vote in the affirmative. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And can you explain why?
Deputy City Clerk.
The reason being is it's similar to the last motion that we looked at. It's a rescindment. So it's a rescindment of the last clause. So that's the only reason why. If you wish to vote, split it, and then you could vote on the first part, which a majority. The second part is changing the decision made by council that requires 2/3 vote.
Okay, so all rescindments.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? I do have a question for City Manager or his designate. We had discussed about this funding model. So if any decisions come forward, how that funding would be allocated, and this particular group, CWSC, would take the, for lack of better words, pot of funding similar to that of the Police Commission, and would distribute that themselves and on the decisions that are, or different resolutions that are brought forward to that committee. So council does not have a say in the final decision-making, and that would be yourself, from what I remember. I just wanted to confirm that.
Your Worship, if I can clarify, and I'm just going to read it right from Appendix B of the document, actually. CWSC will follow an annual budget process through submitting to the Cultural and Social SPC, which will ultimately be approved by Council. This includes reporting back annually to Cultural and Social SPC on program expenditures, performance management, and an allocation summary. Then, in the spring, as provincial and federal grants are projected, a confirmation update to the from the CWSC through admin to the Cultural and Social SPC, again, in the spring, once these grants are executed and if new adjustments are confirmed. So that will be the initial approach in the fall, and then any adjustments confirmed in the spring.
And I totally
come to.
I understand that as well, but I understand it's a report on the expenditures. Council does not have a say in the expenditures. They give the pot of money. This is a report on what they did with the funding, or an update on what they did with the funding. But council themselves do not, if the decision is made from this organization, that the CWSC, to allocate $1 million to ABC group, there's nothing council can say on that.
Mr. Bowe's chomping at the bit to speak here, so I'm going to let him weigh in from there.
Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager, Your Worship, and City Council. The way the budgeting approvals were laid out in this is that every fall or November, the CWSC committee would come together with their AGM, provide a program list budget, and they'd approve that. That would then go to SPC and then to council for final approval. In there, and there's an appendix, there's an example of of the budgets that would be approved by City Council. There'd be very similar to other departments where you have details on where some of that funding is allocated. So the different programs would be all listed out so that council would be able to look at all those, where all those funding allocations are going to and what programs through the FCSS, OSSI, and Reaching Home integrated funding models. Now, many of these will already have providers listed in there from that were sourced through RFSQs of over a 4-year term, but those are all approved yearly through council. And then any new programs that may not have a service provider would have that program with the allocations in there that council would approve. Now, after that approval, administration would then go through the procurement process and RFSQ to get those service providers. CWS may decide that for whatever program, maybe it's split into 2 different service providers, but it would still be within that purview of that program that council approved. Within the springtime, there's many times unallocated funding or unspent funding from some of those programs that would need to be reallocated in some of the different programming listed in the budgeting, and so those this would allow the CWS committee to reallocate those funding without having to wait the month to month and a half to come back to SBC and council, and then the SBC would, or the CWSC would come back and provide that update to council to show those reallocated fundings and where they're going. And this is done through the city manager as having the final approval.
Correct. So what you said is, I understand what you said, but it's still, council does not make a decision on each and every one of this funding that goes forward.
To your worship, the model, the way it's structured here, will have, so the overall grants come to our council with the estimated amounts is I think what in the fall for approval, but the actual allocations, individual allocations, would go through the city manager in this model.
Right. So they're not, it could stop the city manager, and we've obviously got to trust in our city manager. He's here for a reason. Council selected it. So let's hope that's the case. But I just find there's any questions that I've received after seeing this, having this published, has been there's going to be a lack of transparency in there, and that councils are going to be more hands off. When I go through it, I believe it the same way. I appreciate this group, and I appreciate what they're doing. I'm going back to previous groups. I sat on an FCSS funding team, I guess, or committee, and it is a block of money, but I couldn't look at each and every one of those items because, let's face it, it's all of us sitting around here, council members, that will get the questions and the calls if there's a concern out in the community. It's not coming back to CWSC. It's not coming back to the city manager, if not by way of us. So I'm concerned there with the way that this is written, but thank you for answering that. Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I do have a few questions, and this, through you, city manager or designate. A few things. On pages 117 and 118 out of the 273, we talk about people with lived experiences. How and who will be doing that data collection? And is that being done now? Or how is that being done now?
Sorry, Councillor Jen Schmidt-Rempel. I'm not sure what page. I have the actual document here. What page is it? The sector definition that you're looking at, the lived experience, or?
Sorry, I'm just pulling it up. Yeah.
It's in the larger attached document, correct?
Yeah, it's in, I believe it's attachment 1, CWSC, terms of reference, appendices, and final document. So I'm looking at the larger document that's online for the public. It's pages 117 and 118, 273.
Okay, right here. I see.
Have you got it there? Okay. So in that it talks to, people with lived experiences, and that would we be doing data collection and consultation. Again, how is that being done now? Is that being done now? And how will the CWSC do that, and what would their capacity be to do that?
I'll move this over to Kara, but with a lot of the programs and the KPIs that we gather, I think there's a lot of that data collection that would go towards I'm trying to think of the word there, the solution base to be able to develop or adjust programs for future years, but I'll let Kara talk.
All currently funded CWSS agreements have recommendations for us to go and do site visits. So our quality assurance analyst in community social development is responsible for doing site visits with all the funded providers. And part of that is client engagement and engaging with the participants that the service providers are providing services to. And so she keeps track of the feedback that's provided by the participants, and that is shared and used to make funding decisions in the future. This is a new process under the CWSS that we've just implemented now. We were not able to do that in 2021 because of COVID restrictions, but that's part of the client engagement information process.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that's happening, given we've recently seen an example of a group that wasn't fulfilling their obligations, and now we're seeing that move forward. So I'm happy to hear that. There's a lot of work outlined in here for this volunteer committee. Are they going to be getting administrative support for this, or will they be doing all of that work on their own?
Yes, we as the backbone, CSD would provide administrative support on that, and we've identified as CWSS collective impact specialist that would provide a lot of that backbone support as soon as this would move to, they would become the actual CWS committee.
Okay, so would we see some budget pressures coming forward in the fall over that?
I believe there was. Well, I'll let Daryl.
So I'm looking at Mr. Fox. I can't memorize all the budget pressures, so I'm going to.
Through the chair, there was a request for additional positions. Right now we are reviewing internally as administration, and we'll be seeing if we need to bring that forward to council's attention in the fall.
Okay. May I ask one more here? Okay. Out of that data collection that we're doing and that has been newly implemented, is anybody going to be documenting those who are being turned away or aren't eligible for current programs and bringing that forward so that we can adjust, update, and make changes to our programming?
Yeah, so another process that we've implemented under the CWSS, in addition to these site visits, are our quarterly reviews with the service providers. So we do ask them to identify barriers that they are seeing, issues in terms of eligibility that's outlined in their agreements. If there's anyone that they've been able to identify who's fallen through the cracks. That's also part of the role of some of the system leaders that do sit on the CWSS advisory committee now. But we do have processes in place to collect that information.
Thank you.
Acting Mayor Croson.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. What I think you're hearing from a lot of our questions is worst case scenario. When governance works well, when committees work well, they can accomplish a lot. But what if something goes wrong? If failure happens, it's council that will wear this. And the one thing I don't note in the terms of reference, and I may have missed it, is if we can't get volunteers for this committee, if something happens and it's not working, how do we step back from this? How does council reassert their authority over this? Is there a mechanism built in that council can say, okay, we tried this 2 years from now, we realize something's wrong, how do we collapse the committee? Is that in the terms of reference? How would that be achieved, if necessary?
Yes, Councillor Croson. This committee is an administrative committee and therefore is one run through administration. And therefore, I think I could let Mike explain the ins and outs of the administrative committees. Yeah, he knows more about that.
Through the chair to Councillor Crowson. As an administrative committee, if council decided any time to change the way and direct administration in a different direction, we would follow that direction. So we could change course at any time. Currently, we have an advisory group, and we could return to that model or another model that is out there. This model has taken administration about 3 to 4 years to fine-tune and bring to council. So it is the work over several years. And now it's coming to fruition if council wishes us to move in this direction.
No, I appreciate that, and I hope you also appreciate where we're coming from, because as Mayor Higgins said, and as I said, if it's failure, it'll be warned by council, maybe an administrative committee, but it is good to know that there is an option if worst case scenario, which I am hoping, praying doesn't happen, but we need to have that understood as well. And how to keep politics out of something like this. So thank you. Thank you, Mayor Higgins.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Any further questions? Is there any debate? Councillor Carlson?
I'm not sure who's opening debate. Is it?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I am sorry. Thank you for that. Councillor Campbell.
Oh, thank you.
You're to open debate. My apologies.
Thank you, Your Worship. This has been before our Standing Policy Committee and has been debated heavily, and there's a lot of talented people who have come together to create these terms of references and suggested these changes, and they're the people that know what they're talking about, and I highly recommend that we adopt their recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. Pardon me. I will be supporting this. I think, as I said in our committee meeting, I was one of the hard sells on trying something new because I had been heavily involved with our FCSS group and different organizations, Social Housing in Action, and had a great knowledge of how that worked. But I did sort of see the wisdom of streamlining processes, finding efficiencies, and better focusing. And I think, as Mr. Fox said, this has been a 3 or 4 year journey to get here. I was assured when we moved forward that this was going to be 6 to 8 months. So not bad for government work. But I'm keen to see how it goes. I can see the benefits of pooling the dollars together and doing a better job of focusing and streamlining processes. As Acting Mayor Crowson talked about in her questions, I think it's incumbent on council to monitor this, and we can always take it back into our own hands or change courses completely if we find it's not working. But as one of the hard sells on this 4 years ago, I'm pleased that we're at the point where we are now. I can see the benefits to this process, and I will be supportive. Thank you.
Acting Mayor Crowson.
I don't know if I've been a harder sell than Councillor Carlson or not, but I too am having some difficulty moving towards this. I will support this motion with the understanding that there is always a backdoor if things go wrong, that, it is incumbent then on council to support this. It is always difficult finding the balance between oversight as a governance body, as council, and finding success when we give authority to a group. But in this case, we're looking to the expertise from the public. There is a very strong group of volunteers who are behind this, and we say it to the public, but it's equally true for ourselves. Change is difficult, and this is a massive change. But one of the things that we see from looking at other jurisdictions, Quebec does it beautifully, is when we look at ways of putting money into social programs, and we do it in a very structured manner, in a way that actually has, these are what we're trying to achieve, this is where the money's going, and you do it in a way that actually is looking at putting the money to the best use instead of, what is sexy and what might, sell well. It actually has much more, it better achieves the social outcomes than other methods. And so I have great hope that we are moving in the right direction. I will support this, but I will also be actively monitoring this to make sure that it is working the way we think it will. Thank you, Mayor Higgin.
Thank you, Councillor Crowson. Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I certainly appreciate the work that has gone into this, and I do understand and appreciate what both Councillors Carlson and Acting Mayor Crowson have to say, and I'm perhaps 3 years behind them on being sold on this. I still have some real concerns about how the needs of our most vulnerable populations will be met in our community, and I'm not comfortable in turning this oversight over just yet. So I will not be supporting this motion at this time.
Mike on. I too, you know, this is a really difficult one because I know there's been a lot of work that's gone into this. And sometimes I think, do you want it done right or do you want it done right now? And I feel sometimes we're at the right now. I see the work, great work SSIG was doing, wonderful work the CWSS was doing. Move it in here now, we've got the CWSC. The talent and experience is second to none. It's amazing what we've got out there, the representation. My concern is like what I mentioned before in my question is the reporting that's coming in. I'm okay to have reporting coming in, but reporting is meaning that decisions have already been made. I'm not comfortable with that right now. I know that out there, the decisions may be 100% correct. Maybe some are, some aren't, but the calls that come in are to this group around the table. And I'm concerned that allocation of funding without council having more input is a concern for me. Do I think we can get there? I do believe we can, but right at this moment, I'm just uncomfortable and I just can't support this at the moment. Councillor Dodick.
Thank you. I will be supporting this. A lot of times we have to have trust in other folks, administration in this case, to come up with a framework of how this should be done, and then other folks in implementing that framework. So we've been told that this has been something that's been ongoing for quite a while, and although council would like to control all aspects of everything, all the way down to minutiae, I think this is something that needs to be at least looked at and tried, and administration had said that if it turns out this is something that doesn't work out, that council can then reverse course. So I'm prepared to give it a try, and accordingly we'll support it.
Any further debate? If not, I'll turn it back to Councillor Councillor Campbell.
Bah.
I'm looking at Dodick and saying, ask Siri what that is.
I don't have an answer at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell.
Yes, I think we have to give this a try. This has been in the works for a long time, again, with a lot of the experts who know what the needs are of this community, and they're front and center, and we have to trust them. And so, as Councillor Dodick said, if this doesn't work, we can figure it out, and we will. But I think right now this is the time to accept this resolution, so I'll ask for my colleagues' support. Call the question.
And we'll do that by roll call.
So this again requires 2/3 vote in the affirmative. Councillor Dodick?
In favor. You threw me on the rescission.
Councillor Middleton Hope?
Opposed.
Councillor Palladino? You got to use the microphone.
Sorry.
In favor.
Councillor Parker?
Opposed.
Acting Mayor Crowson?
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel?
Opposed.
Mayor Higgin?
Opposed.
Councillor Campbell?
In favor.
Councillor Carlson?
In favor.
There not being 2/3 vote in affirmative, the motion is lost.
You. Moving on. 3.1.2.
Not making anybody happy today. I really.
Next, we have a motion from Councillor Campbell, Chair of the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee, Affordable and Social Housing Incentive Options 8.1.2. Be it resolved that City Council direct administration to investigate the development of a community-wide affordable and social housing operating grant with options to be included in the 2023 to 2026 operating budget deliberations. And number 2, direct administration to review the information related to the specified property, Cooley Creek Seniors Building Project, to identify one-time funding possibilities, including the direct effect on rents and costs for tenants and the implications of such at this property to return to the June 21st, 2022 meeting of City Council. And number 3, direct administration to create an advocacy plan for affordable housing and present to the June 24th, 2022 Advocacy Advisory Committee. Councillor Campbell.
I'll open it up for any questions that we have.
Questions? Councillor Carlson.
Sorry, Mayor Hagan, can we just see the entire thing? Can I ask to divide number 2 out, please?
Just a motion to divide?
Motion to divide number 2.
So just a motion to divide, and we will make a vote on that. So, all in favor? Any opposed? So carries, okay. So we will vote on 1 and 3 together. 2 will be separated out and divided. All right, there's 1 and 3. Board, we'll go back to questions on, as it sits now, divided with 1 and 3. Is there any questions?
I did, Mayor Hagan?
Yes.
If I can, through you to City Manager or Designate, when this came in front of the SPC, there are many questions about the impacts that doing this could have on other properties wanting them to come forth. If we say, we'll forgive you or we'll give you a grant, and when we first discussed this 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, whenever it was, we were informed that it could mean if this sets a precedent and other organizations come forward, it could set us up for a $1 million pressure on property taxes in the upcoming budget if all properties came forward. Is there any discussion around any further clarification?
Councillor Carlson, can I just hop in here?
Yep.
We're on 1 and 3. I think you're on number 2.
Oh, I am on 2. Sorry, if we're just doing 1 and 2.
So if you want to just hold that one, my apologies. I should have stopped you sooner. My apologies. 1 and 3, is there any on that? Any questions? Seeing none, to vote on 1 and, oh, there's a question. Acting Mayor Crowson.
Thank you. I think we just owe it to administration, to the city manager, to be sure that that June 24th deadline would hold. Is that doable to have an advocacy plan ready in less than 3 weeks?
Your Worship, we won't have the plan ready, but we might have a framework ready for the 21st is my understanding in speaking with staff.
Sorry, that was my only question. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Any other further questions for 1 and 3? Debate?
One quick question, if I can, through you, Your Worship, to City Manager or Designate. I know that other communities have discussed the social housing operating grant. I can't recall whether other communities have actually implemented it, or are they still in the discussion phases?
Hello, Councillor Carlson. Many of them are still in the research and development phase right now. I think City of Edmonton's still looking into that.
Thank you.
But the advocacy is is ongoing.
Advocate piece definitely is ongoing, and I knew that City of Edmonton seemed to be further down the pipe than most groups. I wondered, but they haven't implemented it yet. They're probably waiting for their...
Not that I'm aware of, right? And every municipality is different, everywhere from Canmore to Edmonton.
Okay, thank you. Second question, if I can. An affordable and social housing operating grant. We currently do have some funds in our affordable housing bucket. I can't recall. I think we take some from real estate and land development proceeds and some perhaps from the operating budget. Do we know how much we put into that fund yearly?
I'll direct that to Mr. Matthews, who's just looking it up right now.
250,000 comes to mind, but I'm not 100% sure. Or if we changed it.
So what, I'll have to clarify this and make sure I got this right here. I'm just looking at one piece on the affordable housing. The affordable social housing capital grant that we have taxation support of 30,000, 120,000 from subdivisions, so a total of 150,000.
And that's a capital grant, not an operating.
That's right. And then, of course, there is still, other pieces inside of affordable housing in regards to like your COVID rent supplement as well too. So, and I just got one of my background said, yes, it is 150,000 per year.
Perfect, thank you. And how much was spent out of the COVID rent supplement that we had put out?
I will have to take a look into that and get back to you.
Sorry.
While looking to that, Councillor Dodick, you've got something for 1 and 3?
Yeah, I was just wondering if we should amend the word after advocacy from plan to framework to accord with or to align with what the city manager said, who said he wouldn't have an advocacy plan ready, but an advocacy framework. So I would propose that as replacing the word plan with framework as a friendly amendment if Councillor Campbell agrees, an unfriendly amendment if he does not.
I'm going to go friendly.
Go friendly. You're sitting beside him. Good idea. All right. So a friendly amendment there, direct administration create an advocacy framework, a plan for affordable housing and presented June 24, 2022, Advocacy Advisory Committee. It's been accepted. We're still on 1 and... Is there any objections to doing that? Seeing none, we'll take that as the friendly. Councillor Campbell. And we will go to Acting Mayor Crowson. Question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Higgin. To the city manager or designate, just when we're talking about investigating the development of a grant, I assume it would look at recommended amounts of the grant, funding source of the grant, but would it also include ensuring that whomever is applying would have a business plan? Would it also look at purpose for the grant? I just want to be certain if we're going to send you off to develop this, that the information coming back would be all the things that council would want at that time, especially if it's coming back for the operating budget. So it's kind of we have one shot at it at that time. What information would be included in the package brought back to council under that go create a grant?
To your worship, to Councillor Crowson. So the number of things in the developing that, it would be very similar in essence to what we do with other agreements that go out in the requirements. So including financials, statements that have to come back from, or audited financial statements that come back from those groups. We've set up very similar to what our contribution agreements are with the federal government. So, there'd be a lot of different performance measures inside of it, other criteria to ensure that it's being spent on the affordable housing in the way that City Council would wish it to be. So when we come back with that, we could give a bit more clarification of all those different pieces that would be inside of it, but it would be very much like a contribution agreement we've seen from other layers of government.
Can it be connected to our housing plan that we already have in place?
I would believe that would be the case.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Higgin.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, 1 and 3, and we go to, now we're going to vote on 1 and 3 as, and we'll actually go to debate, opening up with Councillor Campbell for 1 and 3.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Your Worship. This is fairly self-explanatory. We're asking administration to go away and come up with a framework. And it is in line with the City Council's strategic alignment for 2022 with healthy and diverse and community well-being and safety strategy. So I would ask for my colleagues' support.
Thanks. You have Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Hagan. I will be supporting the first two operative clauses, or 1 and 3, I guess. On this, I do like the grant-based approach to helping with subsidizing affordable or attainable housing in our community. It provides us with greater flexibility and greater certainty going forward. Doing this on just a one-off basis or a first-come, first-serve doesn't hold much merit to me, but exploring this grant-based approach, I think, is a proper approach, and I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Councillor Dodick.
Yes, Councillor Campbell's comment that it was self-explanatory swayed me, so I will be supporting it.
For 1 and 3, Deputy Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much. And I mean, we should always be advocating for affordable housing opportunities in the city because we know that there is certainly a need for that. And getting out in front of the grant option, taking a look at what some other cities are doing and exploring those opportunities is just simply proactive on our part. So I will be supporting this as well.
I will be supporting because of what all of they said. So, no further closing. Councillor Campbell.
Call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Now we'll move on to operative clause number 2, which is from Councillor Campbell. Direct administration to review the information related to the specified property, Cooley Creek Senior Building Project, to identify one-time funding possibilities, including the direct effects on rents and costs for tenants and the implications of such at this property, to return to the June 21st, 2022 meeting of Council. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Your Worship. And this is an ongoing issue with Cooley Creek Seniors Building Project, trying to come up with ways to help with the direct effect on rents and costs for tenants. So this would be another thing that administration would take away and try to come up with solutions, and I would ask for my colleagues' support on this.
Any questions? Is that question, debate? Councillor Dodick, question.
The question arises from the question that Councillor Carlson had initially asked, and I was wondering if the resolution were to be changed, or rather, if the resolution to also include what the potential consequences of it being a precedent might be, that might assuage some of Councillor Carlson's concerns. So my question is, can that be done?
Has that changed it too much from what it currently is? To me, it would seem that's too much of a change, because this is looking outside rather than just what says rents and costs for tenants, but then that's just my opinion. I think it's too much of a change. I don't know how friendly that would be, Councillor Dodick.
Well, except it says, and the implications of such. So implications could mean, what would be the implications? One of them might be that it sets a precedent, which might then have an impact or implication on for example, other properties coming in, and what implication or impact it might have on, as far as a pressure on the budget might be concerned. So I think implications of such is wide enough to say that it's within the scope of that part of the resolution.
I see direct effect on rents and costs for tenants, and the implications as such, that's the rents and costs for tenants. Is that not the way that you read it?
No.
No. Well. So I've got the cost for tenants and the implications of such being part of that. That's how I would read it. So maybe we want to take a recess and look quickly at this, because to me it's part of the first, and so I don't know. I guess, Councillor Campbell, what is your meaning on this?
Well, for me, this is just an investigation into the implications of the study. I think it's fairly broad-based.
So that's implications of anything then, is what, the way that you're seeing it?
Yes, that's what I would say. I mean, I know it specifically says at this property, but I think this also, the implication would be to this property, but that impact on other properties. That's my take on it.
My understanding is, since it does include that, would we need to have any change? Would there need to be a friendly?
It's in my mind,
already covers it.
That's in my mind. But I mean, if there's if it gives pause for others to put something else that clarifies a little more, I'm fine with a friendly amendment.
Okay, so I do have now. Is it related to this, Director of Finance? Is it come back to the previous question? I just see that you're in the queue here. Oh, I've got Director of Finance. So how did that? Oh, Finance, City Treasurer's Finance. Tony, thank you, Mr. Vanden Heuvel.
Yes, it is related. Just the way that this clause was worded coming out of the SBC, it was in response to a request from Lethbridge Housing Authority regarding tax relief on and going back a number of years, and so they had a request into I believe back last August. Council felt it had been delayed. They wanted some closure and finality put together on this. So the way this is worded to a specific property to address a request that has been hanging out there but not dealt with for a number of months that council wanted closure on. So that's the background as to why and the implications of council providing any sort of tax relief or one-time grant or anything to a specific property holder, a specific organization, and a specific dollar amount. So I hope that kind of gives the background of where that wording came from.
It was for one specific property. So going back to Councillor Dodick, you can challenge that. Did you want that added? Do you want to make an amendment then? Because the way that it was explained to me, this is for this property then. Because that's what came out of the SPC. So would you like to make an amendment on that?
I would suggest that after the words "and the implications of such," to say, "and without restricting the generality of the foregoing to include the implications that may relate to potential budgetary pressures on an ongoing basis."
We'll just give it a few minutes here to come up. And could we just take a quick 5-minute break there? Craft that if we could. Thank you, Reiko. Councillor Dodick. All right. Thank you for your patience. We will move along here. We do have the friendly currently amendment up on the screen. And so we're going to, once everybody has the opportunity to have a look at it, we will vote on. Is there any objections to this? To including this as a friendly? Councillor Campbell?
It's a friendly, yeah, no, that's, I accept that.
And there's nobody that objects to adding this to the resolution?
Oh, I have a question about it.
Okay, we can ask questions, but
So who's the mover?
Councillor Campbell.
But the amendment is from Councillor Dodick.
Yeah, and the city manager understands or will explain what that means.
I can speak to the broad-based implications. So there's the implications respective to the specific property, but then there's the implications respective to the larger city as a whole and other entities that might there, as well as incentive options where others see if there's a tax incentive option for them to come here, there actually, you might get more businesses that come here looking as a result of that. So does that answer your question?
So before we continue, before you ask any further questions, we're going to take a vote on this. Is it the vote on the?
So, can I say?
Yeah, you please. You got me way too confused now.
Sorry about that. So what we're doing right now is we're treating it as a friendly amendment. So wording in bold has been added to it. So the question is, does any member of council object to adding this to the motion without a vote? If any one person of council objects to including this, we would treat it as a formal amendment, and we would have a process to deal with that. And if that passes, then it would be included. If no member of council objects, then we'll just go ahead with the motion, the questions, and the debate as shown.
Being as a friendly, accept.
Yes.
Okay, so does anybody have any objection? Seeing none? All right. So we have it in front of us here. We can actually make the changes necessary, would we?
It's just already done.
It's already done, okay.
So any questions?
So questions, Councillor Carlson, thank you for your patience.
Actually, this amendment, I think, takes away any of the questions I had, because it will accomplish what my questions were intended to accomplish. So thank you.
Acting Mayor Croson?
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. I think I'm similar to Councillor Carlson. I was worried about how this would impact others in the community, and I think it's been answered by this amendment.
All right, so as a whole, is there any further questions? So to open debate, Councillor Campbell.
I think, yeah, as my colleagues have said, the amendment really seeks to find clarity about the implications that this will have. So that gives me pause to accept this as is, and I hope that my colleagues will accept this.
Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Mayor Hagan. I know we're in a debate right now, but
You can do question. No, he opened
Public
debate.
question?
But that's fine. No, you're.
Thank you. Just through you to the city manager or designate. When it was very specific, not only was I opposed to it, but I think the timeline was fine. Now that it's more general to the whole community, is the timeline returning in 2 weeks still doable? Or should it be pushed off a bit further to give you and your team some time to?
Through your worship, Mr. Matthews can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we are prepared to meet the timeline. He may just shoot me, man.
We should be able to meet this timeline inside of here. An extra 2 weeks would always be great, but if we can meet this timeline, if that's council's pleasure.
Sandwiches be delivered nightly? Is that what's happening?
Because you got nothing else going on with the budget.
Sorry, retract what I said. Wind that tape back. Yeah, actually 2 extra weeks would be much appreciated, so.
A question, well,
My
a question
mistake.
I would have is, I think Mr. Laverty is here. Taxes are due on June 30th, correct, Mr. Laverty? Okay. And if 2 weeks would be beyond that point, how would that be dealt with as we're trying to work for this particular property prior to the tax, which is June 30th? And so June 21st, if we put it 2 weeks, it's beyond the deadline for taxes.
I don't think that's an issue because this was changed from a tax relief or tax exemption to a one-time funding in the same amount. But
the time in between that you'd be funding it until that came through, I would imagine.
yeah, I just know that the request was changed from tax relief to a one-time grant request. So it really shouldn't have any tax implications.
Mr. Matthews?
Your Worship, to Councillor Carlson as well. So that is correct right now, because what we're looking at here is a grant component, at least the way I'm interpreting this to be. This isn't to do with a tax cancellation for any of the current. It's looking at a grant component. So if that's not correct, then we'd have to have a different timeline.
Yep. And I totally, thank you for that. I totally understand that it would just be the timeline in between, so the tax would be paid. And if they're using that for taxes, it would come later, so there'd be that time in between. But I understand where you're coming from. Thank you for that. Appreciate that update. Councillor Middleton Hope.
We're still in questions. So
Questions.
City manager to his designate. So what we're looking at here is tax relief for 1 year. Is there adequate language within the amendment that gives you comfort that this is a one-time request and that they will not be back asking for additional relief next year?
Yeah, it doesn't preclude the ability to come back another year, in my opinion, so. Mr. Matthews?
Yeah, so in regards to this, once again, too, so this is looking at a one-time funding possibility for the Cooley Creek Seniors Building Project. So in this example here, the proxy for that one time would be the tax amount potentially we'd come back on, but it wouldn't. We'd come back with that option to say that, okay, so it's estimated that the taxes on this property is going to be X, the grant would be this for one time. It doesn't preclude in the resolution that this wouldn't come forward again in another period. And it would only be dealing with, because this property is, in my understanding, still under construction, would only be dealing with 2022 and on that specific property only.
Thank you.
And Mr. Vanden Heuvel, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I think just for purpose of making it clear, it is, as City Treasurer outlined, it's for 2022 on a specific property, requested by Lethbridge Housing Authority, which is not the owner of the property. So to Councillor Dodick's amendment there about the implications, council is going to have a way that should they choose to support this, they have certainty that providing a grant to LHA accomplishes what council is intending by this, right? And it doesn't preclude LHA, any other affordable or social body, from coming forward to council on a one-off basis next week, next year, next month. But the previous two says, or the previous two that you voted on previously said, we're going to go explore whether we're going to have a social affordable housing grant program in place. But between council making a decision on that and council making this one-time, one-off decision for one housing provider on one property, the door's open for anybody to be able to come and ask as well.
Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. I'm just not sure if right now is the time. I'm sure Mr. Sarsfield will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd like to make a motion to amend June 21 to July 5, just to give a little leeway, because I know that there's some
motion
folks
to
working on
amend?
budget right now. That
So motion to amend?
motion to amend June 21 to July 5.
All right, so is there any objections, or do we need to go to a vote on? Okay. I'm loving this particular resolution, aren't I? All right, we will go to a vote on that.
Self-explanatory.
Are there any opposed? Or any discussion? Seeing none, we'll go for a vote. All in favor of changing to July 5? Opposed? Carries. Thank you. All right, so now we're back to the main motion as amended with July 5th. And we'll go back to Councillor Campbell. Are there any further questions as amended? Seeing no further questions as amended, open debate. Councillor Campbell.
I think we've touched on all of it. I will just leave it open to anyone who has a comment, but I would ask for my colleagues' support on the amendment as it is and on the resolution with the amendments as they are.
Right. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Hagan. Just for consistency's sake, I did vote against this at the committee level because the specificity was too specific. And this does give the changes that have been made allow council to see the broader implications on the entire community. So now I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Any further debate? Seeing none, back to Councillor Campbell.
Call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? Happy dance now that one is passed and through. All right. And I do have, if we can move, we do have in the audience here, if we can move up 8.14, deal with that first, and put 8.13 proposed electoral ward system as after, if that is okay. So we would start off with the motion coming from 4.3 that was removed, the response to January 18th OBM green bins. If we can do that first as 8.13, or 8.14 we'll visit first, and we'll go back to 8.13 if that's okay with everyone. Seeing no concern there, we will move along. So this is moved by, I have a sponsor coming from the organics. Oh, from the consent agenda, so Deputy Mayor. Response to January 18 OBM read green bins. 8.1.4 be resolved that City Council receive for information the curbside organics program yard waste stations option report. Any questions? Questions, debate, start, open up. Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
All right. Yep, we had this presentation come forward with regards to the green bins. I think it was pretty self-explanatory. The report was full and gave out the options with regards to the green bins, answered the questions that were presented and brought forward from a previous council meeting. So I would ask that council support this.
I do have debate. Councillor Dodick.
Yes, I call this my venting my spleen with respect to both blue bin and green bin recycling. So this is going to be basically my last word on it. So please bear with me as I make my comments in that I will not be voting in favor of receiving the report for information. So my comments are the recycling program implemented by the city has bothered me for some time, as people are well aware of. When I was on council, we approved the regional sites, which had an excellent participation rate, in my view. One purpose of those sites was to address the residential recycling material that ended up as waste in the landfill. We had been told that residents were making up 25% of recycling material that ended up as waste, and 75% came from industrial, institutional, and commercial sectors. I was no longer on council, and after more than one vote, the Blue Bin program was imposed on all residents. This had the effect of shutting down private recyclers who provided a service to those who wished to pay for it. The Blue Bin has limitations, as people know. You still, you can't put glass, for example, in the Blue Bins. Not long after that, the organics or green bin program was imposed on all residential customers. No choice to opt in or out was allowed. When I returned to council last year, I asked administration to provide a report to council, costs already spent in furtherance of the program, and the response was basically that all capital costs have been essentially incurred, and that would be the $10 million plus used on the capital thing. I also asked for a report whether the capital cost expended could be used for a voluntary program where residents could drop off their organics at one of the regional sites, which brings us to the report that is being presented for information. When this material was first presented to the Economic Standing Policy Committee, I asked a number of questions, maybe way too many questions, regarding the assumptions used to prepare the report. And I'm not going to go through what the questions were, but suffice it to say that the report did not convince me that this was the answer to dealing with organics. The report did answer some of the questions and did suggest that the capital costs expended to date could be repurposed to a voluntary organics program, but it also showed that yearly operational cost would be less. So when they answered the questions, in fact, the operational costs, if we had a regional organic site, would have reduced the operational cost. To me, there are advantages to a voluntary program, not the least of which is that it would be voluntary. But I am astute enough to know that if I were to introduce a resolution to do that, I would not get enough support for its success. And that was made abundantly clear when we were talking about the changes that were made, moving back lane to front lane and things of that nature. The council, by a 5-4 vote, supported leaving the status quo with respect to half the residents who had the movement made already, but postponing a further decision on the other half to September of this year. So, as I said, this is my last word on this subject. And I won't support this resolution, but if anyone should decide to bring a resolution forward to turn the mandatory organics program into a voluntary one, that I would support. But that's it for me. Thank you.
Any further debate? Well, on that, I can honestly say thank you, Councillor Dodick, that you shared some frustrations of not being on council, and I share similar frustrations that you've spoke about, and I was part of that process, so I know exactly where you're coming from, some of those frustrations. We've dealt with this for quite a few years. It is a receive for information, where that ship we've been told on numerous times has already sailed, and although frustrations, we will go to the vote if there's no more further debate. Seeing none, Councillor Schmidt-Rempel to close.
Not much more to add, other than we received the report, and it outlined, answered questions with regards to the potential use of the yard waste stations to deliver a self-haul program. It was all discussed and outlined, and I have nothing further to add.
All in favor? Sorry, opposed? 2, okay. Next, we'll have a resolution from Acting Mayor Crowson, Chair of the Governance Standing Policy Committee, regarding proposed electoral ward system conceptual plan. Be it resolved, the City Council proceed with the analysis, with the analysis, engagement, recommendation, and implementation phases as identified in the 2025 electoral ward system conceptual plan, attachment 1, approving a one-time budget of $297,000 as follows: $250,000 from 2019 to 2022, N87 implementation of governance review recommendations, and $47,000 from Governance Standing Policy Committee BAU. Now, I do have in here or be it resolved that City Council receive this report as information, but I'm not sure that could be.
As I'm bringing the motion forward, it will be the top one. We're going to swing for the fences.
All right. So with So just a moment here, then. I need to understand, this has got both, so we're going with the top one, we're removing the or, after or for now. Can you please help me with this, Deputy?
Sure. The reason why two different alternatives were presented, because there was no recommendation coming from the Standing Policy Committee. So we left it up to, so we presented two alternatives. So it's up to the chair of that particular committee to present whichever motion she wishes. And if that motion is defeated, then we may look at other alternatives.
We can always do a motion arising if the first one fails.
All right, Councillor Dodick for questions. This is for debate. All right, so to open, I see there's no further questions or no questions, so we'll have Acting Mayor Crowson, open debate.
Thank you, Mayor Hagan. This has been discussed twice at governance, and it is coming out of a non-binding plebiscite that was held during the last election last fall, where the majority asked us to look into a ward system. So just to give people a sense, these are some of the issues that we as a community are looking at. We have low voter turnout. We often see a lack of civic engagement. When we reach out to the public, we don't often hear from them. Council does not demographically reflect the community. Over the years across North America, we've seen fewer working people elected as politicians at all levels of government. And we also know that in the last few years, elections in our city have turned from every 3 years to every 4 years. And people are noting that they often feel left out. And so seeing that the majority in the last election voted for a ward system, the City Clerk's Department looked at a process for looking at whether or not wards should be recommended and also looking at other issues around our politics and our processes. And so this is what has been recommended to be brought forward. In this process, it would recommend that we set up a commission, and there would be several places at which council would have the opportunity to make changes and to have a say in this. First, in how we would set up the mandate if this passes today, in the commission structure, in the bylaw, etc. Now, I don't know if wards are the answer. I know a lot of people think they are, and some people think they aren't. But as I said, there are problems in our community, and I think it is time for a community conversation. This would allow us to have a conversation. A small group, a commission would be set forward. They would be going through these issues. They would then come back with recommendations, and it would be this council who would have final say on which recommendations, if any, would be passed or not. Our city has several times changed our political system. We started out with an aldermanic system where we had annual elections. 1914, we turned to a commission form of government. Then in the 1920s, we turned to the city manager form of government that we have now. We've had mayors elected by council, we've had mayors elected by the voters. And so we are constantly trying to evolve and change our political system. And only by having conversations with the community can we create a system that is the best working one at this time. And that is what is being proposed here. The last time when we had a look into whether or not we should have full-time counselors, the people who were part of that actually came back with no to full-time counselors, but yes to a ward system. And so we don't actually know where this conversation will go, but what we need to do is set this group up and then work towards creating the mandate, et cetera, and having that conversation. And that is what is presented before us today. And I am sure that there are going to be questions on my colleagues, so I will stop there.
Questions? I see no I do have one question. This the 250 or sorry 300 or 297. I know the breakdown as I went through that. So I just got the hard copy here. One question I had on it. So I had mine highlighted and I don't have mine here. Okay, so the member honorarium, so there'll be more than the 6 members that we have here. There'll be additional, from what I understand. Is that correct, Acting Mayor Crowson?
Well, again, when we set up the bylaw and everything, we would actually be establishing how many commissioners there are as part of this. So you have before us proposed that there would be honorariums, and that would be the size, and they would be supported by city staff to go through as well. And so there is a budget proposed of $297,000, but it's not until we actually get the process set up that we know how much money would actually be spent and in what ways.
So would could I put a friendly in there of a budget of up to $297,000? Would you be okay with that?
I have no problem with that because again, There's a lot of checkpoints throughout, and until we decide those, we won't know exactly how much is spent. So up to, I have no problem as a friendly.
Thank you. Councillor Dodick? Oh, this debate? I'm sorry, we're kind of out of questions and debate. We've been back and forth a little bit here, haven't we? All right, any further questions?
Yes.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the report to the committee, and thank you for putting some context behind that, Acting Mayor Crowson. So this resolution, if passed, would just continue the conversation in regards to the merit of either going award system or non-award system. Am I correct on that?
Yes, it is not a decision that we're moving to a award system. It is looking into it, analyzing it, coming back with costs, everything else. And then, like I said, who knows where the conversation might go. They might bring up other recommendations as well.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that answer. My second question is, well, could this possibly look at, like, at the end of the day, whatever this commission comes to a decision, let's say they want to go to a certain kind of ward system or district system, whatever, would there be an opportunity for the community to see this and then vote on it prior to the election? Because a lot of people, when they voted in the last one, it's kind of a yes or no question. Yes or no, do you want a ward system? Well, leading up to an election, sometimes people are confused. There's so many people running, yeah, ward system, why not? Would there be an opportunity, because I think Red Deer actually did this a while back, where they actually showed something of what exactly it's going to look like, something concrete, and then the community had an opportunity to vote for it in that election, that if it was approved, that would be the new system in place. Is there an opportunity to do something like that possibly?
We're working at a very high conceptual level right now. And certainly as we work through it, those would be some of the concerns. I know a lot of people have said, or not a lot, some people have said to me that people weren't sure what they were voting on. But you're right. We need to give them, as we move through this, the commission has to report back. We could have them report back to governance so that the public can see. We can build all of that into the system as we move forward to have the check-ins that are necessary with council and with the public.
So there is an opportunity to put this on the next election ballot, as this is exactly what the commission recommends, and then now it's up to the community to vote for it. There is that opportunity.
At this point, it is set up that council is the final determinant, but council could determine to give the public the ability to make that decision and not council itself. So
Thank you.
It could be a plebiscite.
Appreciate that. Thank you for the work you guys put into that.
Questions? Councillor Middleton Hope?
Just a question to Councillor Crowson. Are there opportunities here, and I think that's what Councillor Parker was alluding to, are there opportunities here for public engagement in terms of open houses and so forth to present some of the strategies that might come out of this working group?
The commission could be set up that way, right? At this point, we're just setting up the conceptual plan. Like I said, This is high level. Throughout, we would have to set up a bylaw, we'd have to set up mandate, we'd have to set up how we're recruiting. So there's a lot of places that those decisions could be made. And so, yeah, it could be set up in a variety of ways.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, to open debate. Acting Mayor Crowson?
I think I already did, so I will hear from my colleagues and I will close debate.
Thank you. So we'll start off with Councillor Dodick.
Yes, thank you. Let's not lose sight of the fact that what we're talking about is a conversation that's going to cost up to $297,000. So that's the first thing that we're talking about today. Now, the report that we have before us is very comprehensive, and I would suggest that if it was available to the public before the last election, and then the question was posed to them when they actually knew what the cost would be and what might be entailed, I would suspect that the margin of 55 to 45 would have gone the other way. And the example of Red Deer, which I will allude to shortly, will, I believe, be a good example of that. I should also, as a bit of an aside, remember that the bridge plebiscite, which was on the same ballot, which had many questions, including questions involving not only separate school and public school, councillors, mayors, but also provincial, things of that nature. The support was 60-40. That support would be lessened, I suspect. I'm positive it would be lessened once people saw the response or the response the administration gave to the question as to how much tax consequences would be with respect to building the bridge. And I would suggest if everyone knew that their tax bill would go up significantly for a multiple year period of time, that the 60% that voted in favor of the bridge would have not done so. The bridge also serves an interesting example in terms of, in the simplest situation, when you do a ward system, one of them would be based on population. So you've got the west that has the most population, the south, which is actually significantly less, and the north side, which is even less than that. But if you look at, for example, and the city publishes the voting patterns as to what happened, the interesting thing, if you look at that, is if you look at the west side and the south side and the north side as discrete sections of the city, and let's say that they were represented by a ward, you will see that approximately 70% of the people plus voted for the bridge that lived on the west side. It was closer to 50-50 on the south side, and quite a bit less on the north side. So you can, one of the complaints about the ward system is that you can have ward councillors get together and decide they were going to do something together. So if you have the south and the west get together, they can impose a bridge on the north side, or even though most of them don't want it to happen. And that's one good reason for having an at-large system, because the Municipal Government Act says that we have to vote on the basis of what's best for the city. Now, in terms of history with respect to the ward system, on October 5 of 2009, the city clerk prepared a report reviewing the pros and cons of a ward system. It gave examples, or the example that only Calgary and Edmonton have a ward system, and confirmed at that time that the candidate outside of a ward can run in a ward. You have to live in the ward to vote in the ward, but you don't have to live in the ward to be a councillor. In February of 2011, a city councillor who spearheaded the ballot ward question in the last ballot got elected, but in 10 years, nothing was really done to update the 2009 report or to even look at the cost of implementing a ward system. Instead, a few months before the 2020 election, specifically on July 13, 2022, a question is put on the ballot simply asking, do you support using a ward system to elect city councillors starting with the 2025 election? For those electors who wanted more information, they could go to the city website and they could find info such as what I just said. Electors have to vote in their wards, candidates do not have. But one thing that an elector would not be able to find out was the cost associated with implementing a ward system. There are two components to the report that we have. One is that to have a conversation is going to cost up to $297,000. And then if you actually implement it, it's going to cost anywhere from $0 to $300,000 a year on an ongoing cost. But now we know, as I said, that the one-time costs are approximately $300,000 just to study or have a conversation whether a ward system should be implemented. And then, of course, the ongoing costs if it is. In 2009, the city clerk, in the current report, the city clerk notes that also that Edmonton and Calgary remain the only Alberta cities with a ward system. So nothing has changed since the 2009 report. So basically, we have Grand Prairie, Red Deer, Medicine Hat, Municipality of Wood Buffalo, and Fort McMurray who don't have a ward system. Interestingly, and Councillor Parker referred to it, Red Deer had this debate in 2013 before their election in 2013. And what they did is they put the cart where it was supposed to be, behind the horse, as opposed to what we've done, which is we ask the question and then we find out what it's going to cost and what's involved in that sort of thing. So I'm going to just read a little bit about what happened. And this happened in October of 2013, before the election, and it was got pretty wide play in the media, and it said, panelists discuss pros and cons of ward system. And for example, Mount Royal political science professor Dwayne Bratt, former Red Deer City Councillor Larry Pim, and Edmonton-based political blogger Cornway discussed the issue, and there was time for questions as well. And it refers to that Brad pointed out that one of the key benefits of a ward system is that councillors are closer to the people because they represent a specific neighborhood. But as to the weaknesses, Brad said councils elected in this way may experience more infighting and may be less likely to prioritize the good of the city over the good of their distrust. Councillors may also tend to battle over pet projects in their neighborhoods. He said the focus can be on projects for their region, but the cost of which are spread citywide. For example, it's a real benefit if you can have a recreation center in your ward that is paid for by the whole city. Brad said the benefits of an at-large system, currently the case in Red Deer, are that councillors will advocate for the needs of the entire city instead of a subsection of their community. There tends to be less conflict in an at-large system because councillors aren't pitting one part of the city against another. And the councillor at that time also said, in my experience, probably 90% or more of decisions made by council are citywide decisions. I think it's easier to take a whole city approach when you're responsible to the whole city rather than just one segment. While candidates in an at-large system may not live in your area of the city, in many cases that's true in the ward system too. There's not necessarily the necessity for a candidate to live in the ward he or she seeks to represent. In fact, the Municipal Government Act says that to be the case exactly. Thus, before the question was put to the electorate or on the ballot in Red Deer, it was debated and reported on, and it was discussed prior to the election. And the decision made by the Red Deer on the ballot question, without having to spend a ton of money to have a conversation, Red Deer chose to remain on an at-large, as an at-large city and rejected the ward system. And the vote was approximately 70% to 30% in favor of retaining the at-large. So unfortunately, I submit that we approached the question backwards. If a councillor or councillors felt the ward system should be explored, they should have had a discussion about it before the 2021 election. They could have done exactly what Red Deer did. They could have had, they had the Governance Standing Policy Committee in place in 2021, and they should have requested the report we now have before us today and presented at that time. The public would then have seen this report. They would have seen the costs associated with not only the one-time up to 297,000 conversation, so they would have seen the pros, the cons, the costs. So before deciding whether they were in favor of exploring a ward system, they would have the information in front of them. What we're doing now is we have the information now, but the public didn't have it at the time of the election. And with full information, I expect that the 55-45 vote would have been more like and this is the exact number in Red Deer, 71.7% of Red Deer folks who rejected a ward system. So I'm asking City Council that if they really do want to explore this, they have the information now in this report to put it on the ballot in 2025 and let the citizens decide if they want to have a $297,000 chat and potentially ongoing costs of up to $300,000 per year. Obviously, not supporting this.
All right, that brings a lot of questions, but I know that we're in debate, so we will go to Councillor Palladino.
Worship. Oops. And I'd like to thank City Clerk's Department for putting this report together. It's very in-depth. I initially liked the idea of forming a commission, and I liked the phases, the milestones, and the timelines that were put into it, and I was totally on board. In fact, you could say I was drinking the Kool-Aid, right up until I saw the $300,000 price tag, just for the recommendation. And that could be followed up in operational costs of $300,000 annually for 3 additional staff, followed by $75,000 every election year, and another $300,000 every 8 to 12 years. Remember, some of us were elected because the public doesn't appreciate needless spending on reports that end up on a shelf collecting dust. I stated that I would vote for needs and not wants, and I'm sorry, but I don't see this as a need. And I wonder wonder if we can't obtain citizen engagement using basic survey questionnaire type tools that include projected cost and not just a yes or a no. So I won't be supporting it.
Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. I appreciate Councillor Dodik's very in-depth debate. So I'll be fairly brief. When I ran for council in 2007, I was very much in support of a ward system. And that's because I didn't have a clue what it was or how it worked. And I think that sort of ties into what Councillor Dodik was saying. If folks have all the information, they may come to different conclusions. I remember being young and asked, do you want a pony? Well, of course I want a pony, until I find out what it's going to cost and the upkeep, and that I have to do a lot of work every day to do it. And so had I known that, I would have said, no, I don't want a pony. I'll take a bike instead. And so I've had time to understand a ward system. I've had chats with folks in the community, and I do understand. I think it was Acting Mayor Crowson who in the committee meeting posed the question that it might not be the ward system people want, but people are saying there are some problems or some issues, some challenges that we would like to solve. And I think Acting Mayor said, we'd be much smarter to say, what are the problems or the issues you have with the current system that you are trying to solve? Because a ward system doesn't automatically increase voter turnout. It doesn't automatically increase voter engagement. It doesn't automatically decrease the number of candidates. It just doesn't. And so I think, and those are many of the reasons that people say that's why I want a ward system. And so I think having a conversation, and in my mind it can be a much cheaper conversation than $300,000 just to have a conversation, can be done with our community. To have some public workshops, bring in some, as Councillor Dodik mentioned, some folks who have an understanding of these systems. Bring them in, invite the public in, let's all learn together, and let's ask those questions. I think we need to ask those, solve those problems. And I keep remembering Acting Mayor saying, what are the problems we're trying to solve? And let's get a list of those problems, put them to folks and say, how could we do this better? Because a ward system is not the guarantee that all of these issues will disappear. In fact, I highly doubt they would. They just become smaller and more neighborhood oriented. So I do not support this at this time. I do believe our community wants to have a conversation. I do believe our community has some issues they would like to address, but this isn't the way. Thank you.
Councillor Middleton Ho.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I support this initiative and support my colleague, Acting Mayor Crowson. I'll make a couple of comments. Cart before the horse. That's exactly what we're doing. We're not debating whether or not we go to a ward system. What we're talking about here is we're talking about exploring the possibility. We're talking about spending money on an analysis to determine the future of the electoral system of this community. I see nothing wrong with that. It is laudable that Red Deer and other communities have spent money and have spent energy on doing this. I have lived in a ward system, some of you haven't. Quite candidly, the ward system is effective. There are other communities beyond Lethbridge, or Calgary and Edmonton, Sherwood Park, and the County of Lethbridge have also gone to ward systems. So at the end of the day, what we're not asking for the community's support to advance a ward system. What we're asking here is to advance the prospect of exploring this further. And I think, unlike my colleagues, I think that the 55%, 54%, I don't think you can turn around and say that if they were properly informed, the citizens were properly informed, that that number would have been different. I don't think we can say that. I think what we can say is that 54% or 55% of the population who voted in the last election said, take a look at this. That's what we're doing. And so I see no difficulty with that whatsoever in supporting it. We are being asked to support the analysis of the ward system to look at options that may or may not be approved in the future. But I think this is money well spent. We had no difficulty as a council in the past approving a significant expenditure on the KPMG report, which has provided us with many opportunities to examine the way in which we do business. This is just yet another opportunity for us to look at the way in which we do business and to come back to the citizens of this city and say, we've either got a good system and it works, or we've got a system that we'd like to propose to you that we think works better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker.
Thank you very much, and this is great conversation and very good points made right around the table. And but I also believe this is not an opportunity for us to debate the merit of a ward system or not a ward system. There'll be a process for that, and you never know. It could look, may have some kind of rotating representation throughout the community during a term where 2 members of council represent, let's say 3 represent the west side, 2 represent the north side, and 3 represent the south side. And every time the deputy mayor changes role, each one of us kind of move around. So you kind of have your town halls and you're designated to represent this area. And then when a call comes through our office, they, you have an issue regarding the north side? Well, you know, Councillor Parker and Councillor Middleton Hope are overseeing those areas. They're overseeing the town halls there for those 3 months. So it gives you an opportunity to have a better understanding of the concerns and all that. But it allows anyone who has a concern, they can always call up any member of council, because when you're elected at large, you call the member of council you feel most comfortable with. And so there is pros and cons to each one of these systems. So I do not know what it looks like. And sometimes a ward system becomes territorial, where you're supposed to represent the community as a whole, but if you're representing technically 15,000 people, subconsciously your alliances and your loyalties are those 15,000 people, because those are the people that voted for you, and that's the ones you're accounted to. So, but hopefully in a ward system, everyone's looking out for the greater good in the community, but you risk the idea of become territorial, where if I don't get what I want, I'm not going to support what you want. So, and I think when you speak of questions such as the county, well, I think the county being such a large, massive area, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of acres, it's more of a geographic reasoning because of why they do that. But at the same time, I'm willing to keep an open mind. I think the most important thing here is we're not saying yes or no to a ward system by passing this resolution. We put a question on the ballot, and even though there was strong merit in the arguments presented earlier, there wasn't enough background information, the people voted. The people voted for us, and that's why we're on this table. And so a majority, it doesn't matter if it was 60%, 55%, 80%, or 51%. It's incumbent that we do our job to do the research. And the research, I don't like the cost of $300,000, but we spent $1.2 million in a KPMG report, or $2.4 million, which we did get good value out of it. So I don't think we should be voting just based on this is a $300,000 price tag, because we want to do good governance. And as the acting mayor said, we don't know. This is maybe opening up new ways of how we do things as a council in regards to how we work with the community. So I'm not looking at this as a yes for a ward system and no for a ward system. I'm looking at this as a yes is to continue the conversation. Hopefully we can do it with limited funds. You don't know what this is going to look like. There's going to be check-in points. But because it was on the ballot, we owe it to the community to do our due diligence. So I will be supporting this.
Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just to follow up with what Councillor Parker said, we put the question on the ballot. Non-binding or not, we asked that question. And engaging the conversation will answer some of the other questions that are also being asked around this table. Posing a ballot question and then ignoring its outcome risks alienating voters further and eroding voter turnout, civic engagement, citizen participation, all conditions that we are working to improve. Not exploring this further will increase distrust in council's motives and cause people to refuse to participate further in future conversations. Those are the things we risk. The return on this investment is citizen engagement, and in my mind, well worth that investment. So I will be supporting this motion.
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Some great debate here. I could have been swayed either way here. I guess mostly I think about it was on the ballot, and the ballot said ward system. And again, as many of my colleagues have already said, it's not yes or no for the ward system. It's investigating further, and I have to agree with continuing with that. And I would really like to see us not have to spend that much money on moving forward. But in that respect, I will support the resolution.
Wow, this is, I think as Councillor Campbell had mentioned, I think I sat through this debate here, went over this direction, wondering exactly what was, whether to support or not support this. And I thought coming in here, I had my answer already. I look at the cost of $297,000, and it's I think Councillor Palladino had mentioned previously of needs versus wants, and it's something that is a struggle. I guess it's $300K to do this. Now, flip side to that, this is on the ballot. We put it out there. Unfortunately, we didn't do our due diligence before, I believe. We put it out there. It's the same thing as was brought up here with a bridge. Do you want a bridge? Absolutely, I'd love a bridge. Do you want to pay for it? No. So, if we had all of the information, the implications, what the costs were, tax implications, et cetera, it would maybe change people's decisions. So I'm hoping this process will answer those questions. I'm hoping that it's a heck of a lot less than the $297,000. And I guess one of my questions, if we received his information, this should still come back at a later time. But if we're going to move forward with this, it's something that we're going to have to do. This does take quite some time. I'm thankful what Councillor Parker had mentioned. I remember back in 2013 when I was first elected, I also thought about this hybrid system that Councillor Parker was, we'd chatted about this for, in the past, and how, representation, if there was 2 downtown, 2 west side, 2 south side, 2 north side, and it switched every year, everybody has the opportunity to serve in those areas. There wouldn't be possible, more discussions as far as working together as a team. But, it's I don't know how that works, but maybe that's something that this study would do. Again, the 297, I like where this is going. I truly do. I just don't know if I can, wrap my head around $300,000, as I believe there's a better way to do it. And that's why adding up to $297,000, I did put that in there. I'm hoping it comes in a lot less, but I believe it's something that was on the ballot. If this wasn't on the ballot and it wasn't voted on, I don't think I would be there. I would probably say no, but because it was on the ballot, I would have to go ahead and follow this through. So with that, I will support this. Any further debate? If not, we'll send it over to Acting Mayor Crowson.
Thank you. There is no perfect political system, but political systems can be improved, and ours is in need of improvement. If it was working better, more people would vote and more people would feel heard and as part of the system. When I put on my historian hat, we've been discussing ward systems in Lethbridge since at least 1907. And one of the things that has become very obvious is every time we discuss a ward system, it actually shows that there's other underlying issues. People look at ward system as the answer, but when you actually look into it, there is something else that requires change, and there's something that we've improved. And as I said, we've done different things at different times. We are not saying by moving ahead that ward systems are the answer. We're saying there are issues to be discussed, and we are using this commission, giving it the mandate around wards, but to discuss all of these things and to come back with recommendations. Who knows? They could come back with lower voter age. They could come back with all sorts of things as part of it. And when I hear people say this is a want, not a need, this is about good governance. This is the biggest need that a city council has. It's our highest duty to govern this city properly and to represent and reflect the entire community. And this is what we are doing under this, is we are having that conversation with the community. I also found it interesting that, people were saying if voters had done more research, maybe they wouldn't have voted for a ward system. Well, if we're going to play what if history, if they had done more research, we probably would have had a different council as well, maybe. So, I mean, we can't go on what people may or may not have done. We go with what they did do. They elected this council, and a majority said, look into this system. And so we have here the opportunity to look at all of the problems and concerns. We will move through this, it passed phase by phase, step by step, talking to the public and bringing this forward at each part and create the best possible plan around looking at all of these issues. So I hope my colleagues will support this, and I will call the question.
All right, we're going to do this vote by roll call. So, Deputy City Clerk.
Thanks, Mayor. Councillor Middleton Hope.
In favor.
Councillor Palladino.
Opposed.
Councillor Parker. Acting Mayor Croson.
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
In favor.
Mayor Higgin.
In favor.
Councillor Campbell.
In favor.
Councillor Carlson.
Opposed.
Councillor Dodick.
Opposed.
Motion's carried 6-3.
Right. Wow. Great debate. Yeah. All right. Now we are going to some closed meetings resolutions. CAO, City Manager Performance Review Process, 14.1. Be it resolved that City Council directed the closed meeting discussion with respect to the City Council inquiry process, verbal, remain confidential pursuant to Section 23, Local Public Body Confidences, and 24, Advice from Officials of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And further be resolved that City Council conduct a formal Chief Administrative Officer City Manager review in September 2022 in accordance with the process and format outlined in Policy CC-17, City Manager Performance Review. And further be resolved that City Council direct administration, City Manager's Office, and City Clerk's Office in coordination with the Governance Standing Policy Committee to prepare amendments to Policy CC-17 for the October 27th, 2022 meeting of Governance Standing Policy Committee to align with the following. A quarterly check-in between the City Manager and Council to occur during a closed session of Council meeting in February, June, and December annually. Other check-ins may also occur if requested by the City Manager and/or Council. The formal written evaluation will be conducted in September of each year. The written evaluation will, at a minimum, look at the following areas. A, management and leadership practices. B, relationship with council. C, relationship with staff. D, relationship with the public and media. E, objectives and accomplishments. And F, areas for improvements, suggested training. And with that, I need a mover for that. Councillor Croson.
I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I'll call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? That's so carries. Next, closed meeting, 14.2, Boards, Commissions, and Committees matter verbal. Be it resolved that City Council direct that the closed meeting discussion with respect to the Boards, Commissions, and Committees matter verbal remain confidential pursuant to Section 24, Advice from Officials of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, and further be resolved that City Council direct administration to proceed with the confidential direction provided in closed session. Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
I'll call the vote.
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? So carries. And 14.3, 2023 to 2026 operating budget update. Verbal, be it resolved that City Council direct the closed meeting discussions with respect to the 2023 to 2026 operating budget update. Verbal, remain confidential pursuant to Section 24, Advice from Officials of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Councillor Parker. Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? So carries. And we might just take a quick, does everyone take a quick break or before adjournment, or we're good? We are adjourned.